Hello, welcome back to Laser Cut and Fly RC Models. I'm the laser model guy. What I'm going to do today is carry on with the Spitfire. And first thing to do today is to do a couple of finishing touches with one or two of the components. And then once I've done that, I'm going to lay them all out, lay all those components out onto cutting sheets, depending on which material they're going to be cut from. And then once I've done that, I'm going to send it across to the laser and you'll be able to watch those components being cut out today. Once I've done that, I'll have all the sheets and we'll be able to start to plan our build, and I'll show you how we go about that right now. Let's get going. Just before we start, a quick word about the channel. Thanks to our new members for supporting the channel, and for those of you who'd like to support the channel, you can become a member, or alternatively, if you just look down at the ellipsis at the bottom, the three little dots, if you click on those, there's an opportunity to say thanks, and a super thanks allows you to make a small donation, £2, which would help us keep the channel going, keep all our resources coming in so that we're able to carry on producing and building these aircraft for the channel. So let's get going. So just to finish everything off then, we've got our wing ribs and we've got our wing spars. But what we do know is this is just the outline of the rib. They need to be cut so that they can fit either side of the spars. And also I think what we'll do is with these ones outside of the dihedral area where we've got our plywood strengtheners, I will notch those. I think I'll notch the spars and I'll notch the ribs rather than cut them into sections. But the first thing we need to do is let's just position these ribs back on our leading edge that we've got here. So I'll just press the full stop and that turns us around 90 degrees. So I'll bring that one up. Now where I want this, I want the inside of the bird's mouth to be right on this center line here, but also the bottom of the bird's mouth needs to be level with this leading edge. So I'll just close in on that a little by pressing Control and Shift and then using our arrow keys to move us around, and I think that's about the right place. Now if I maybe take the last one as well and bring that over, I'll put that into position so that the bird's mouth is just on the leading edge and level with the center of this rib on the plan here, and that looks around about perfect there. Okay, so what we can do with this now is we can adjust the size of these spars, because remember we copied these straight off the plan, but remember we discussed that the original plan has a 1/8 balsa wood cover on everything including the wings, because this was a control line model originally and we're converting that to radio control. So what we need to do is just alter the size of these slightly. So if I just bring that round and then bring the top of that to here, you can see, and I'll just alter the angle of this as well so that we're more or less parallel. You can see that this spar is nowhere near as big or as wide as the rib that it's going to support. So what we'll do is we'll go to nodes, and all I'm going to do with this is, if I move this node to the center there and move that node to the center there, snap those into place, I now know that the thick end of this spar is going to be the right size for this rib. So if I then come off there, press my full stop again, flip that round and bring it across to the smallest rib, and then what I can do here is I can go back to nodes. Now I want to be in the center of this. This is the spar. Go back to nodes and I'll just bring that to the center there and bring that to the center there, and I know that that spar will be exactly the right size because it'll taper down, as do all of the ribs. It'll be exactly the right size for that leading spar there, and it will match all of our ribs. So if I just take that out the way, and then what I can do is I can get the smaller spar, and then I can just get that level as well. I can bring that in and do exactly the same but at the other end. So I'll just drop that down until this is, I'll just get that parallel first. There we go. Now if I drop that down until it's in the center of this spar here, just like that, and then take it to the center of the rib, and then all I need to do is go to nodes, and just widen that out a little bit. So come off nodes, flip it round, and then take it to the other end. And what I'm finding here is, if I get to the center of that spar, we're actually not a million miles away. We're not very straight there, to be fair. But I think what we'll do is we'll just bring that in. We'll bring that in, and now I know that we are now I know that our spars are exactly the right size. So that was the first thing that I wanted to do. Next, I want to arrange the remaining ribs out. I won't put these two on, because these are both identical to rib number 1 there. So I'll just bring ribs number 2, and I'll put that in place. Let's bring that over. Make sure that it's right in the center of this rib here, this rib, and I want the bottom of the bird's mouth to be just on our leading edge, our little simulated leading edge, the red line there. There we go, and that is absolutely perfect. So if I bring over number 3 and do exactly the same, and then number 4, exactly the same. I'll just line those up now. There, perfect. And there we go, perfect with that as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rectangle. Now I'm going to make this the length of the wing. Now the balsa we're going to use is 6.4 millimeters wide. So if I make the height of this 6.4 millimeters, 6.4, what I can do is I can bring that down now, and I can put that exactly where that spar is going to be. Now what we notice here is that the plan orientation, or the wings orientation on the plan, isn't quite level, because you can see that we're absolutely bang on the middle at this end of the spar, but when we come to this end we've drifted, so we're going to have to just adjust this slightly, just like that, and then if we drop that down, there we go. I think we are very, very close there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste another one down here for this bottom spar. And the reason I've done that is because I'm assuming that this bottom spar is going to be at the same angle. I think that's very, very close. Okay, so what we've got now is we've got the two spars in place, and we've got all of our ribs in place. So if I press Control and then select each of these one at a time, I'll take the leading edge with us as well, I think. Now if I bring those over, we're now in a position to start cutting the ribs, because we've got our spars in place, so we can actually cut this rib now into sections, and we will know that it will fit around the spars. Now the one thing that we do know is that at this end we've got our strengthening piece here, the ply, and that's going to go through all of the number one formers. So it goes through this number one former right at the centre, and then it goes through these two number one formers where the spar begins, because this is the central part of the wing, this part here, and our spar will start here and then come up. Okay, so let's just have a look at what we need to do with those. The first thing that springs to mind is if we just look at the structure of this wing, this is quite a big wing. If we were to get our measuring tool and just look at where the wingtip's going to be, which will be about here, and then look to where the centre will be, which will be just where that rib is there. If we just look at how far that is, it's 560, which means this wing is going to be over 1 metre wingspan. So when I look at this, I notice that we haven't got many ribs in there, and you can understand that because the original aeroplane being control line was covered in 1/8 sheet balsa, which we're not going to do. So I think what we need to do is, in between all of these ribs on the main plan, we need to insert or create a new rib, because we're going to be covered obviously with covering film. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to group this so that I can manoeuvre it about without it losing its orientation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring that across. I'm going to place it back on, and what we're going to do now is we're going to make new ribs and then put them inside, put them in between these ribs, and then what we'll do is we'll bring our trailing edge over as one piece, and we'll connect that up, and then we'll cut new slots in for the new ribs, and then we'll be, I think, in a much better position to make a sturdy, strong wing with our aura cover for the conversion to radio control. So I take one of these other F1s from over here, and what I'll do is I'll just rotate that, and I'll bring it over and I'll orientate it with this end rib to make sure that it is perfectly upright. And I think if I just move across, I think we'll find that's about where we want it to be. So this is the central rib, which will be right in the centre of the fuselage, and then this will all be covered with 1/16 sheet, because that's the bit that's going to fasten to the bottom of the aircraft. But then from this rib here, we're then only going to be covered with aura cover. So from this rib here, I think we need to start making our new ribs to come in between. So all I'm going to do is just make sure that we've got our tips of our current ribs. I'll make sure that I've got a line joining those so that I know how long the new ribs have to be. And the way I'll do that is
we'll probably do this in blue, I think. And all I'm going to do is go from that to there, to there, to there, and to there. And then if I go to nodes and just convert those to smooth curve nodes, and that gives us a line to work to now to know how long our new ribs that we're creating in between have to be. So what I want to do now is between this rib and this rib, and I'm using the ribs on the plan, not the proper ribs that we've made. All I want to do is measure that distance. So that distance from the edge of that rib to the edge of that rib is 102 millimeters. So I want to come 51 millimeters from the edge of this rib and place another rib there. So all I'm going to do is make a rectangle, and that rectangle will be 51 millimeters long, or wide, sorry, 51. So 51 millimeters, and then when I place that right on the edge of that rib there, you can see that edge there. I know that the edge of our new rib will need to be right there on the edge of that. So all I'm going to do is make a new rectangle, and I'm going to make that 3.2 millimeters wide, and I can now bring that and place it just on the edge, so it's just on the edge of that shape there. And I know that that new shape there is in the right place for our new rib. Okay, so if I just copy, and I'll just put another one there for now, another one there, and another one there. But I do need to measure each of these because it looks to me like they're each one's a little wider than the one before, the gaps between the original ribs. So all I'll do is I will measure. So that's that rib. I'll measure between this rib here, or the bottom of that rib, or the edge of that rib, to this one, and that is 103 millimeters. So I think I'm quite comfortable with that will be 51.5 or 51 3/4. So if I just grab this shape and I make that 51.75, 3/4 of a millimeter difference, and I can bring that across and I can place that exactly on that line there measured, and then what I can do is I can bring our next rib across and just snap it onto the end of that there. There you go. And I know now that that is in exactly the right place, so if I just bring that up to there, drop the top down to where the bird's mouth has to go to. I can then do the same process again on these last two ribs. I'll quickly do that and I'll show you what that looks like with all our new ribs placed in the middle there, with the blue ones. I'll show you that in just 1 second. Okay, so that's them all placed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect our original piece, which was grouped, remember. I'm going to then also press Control, and I'm going to pick up each of our new shapes for where our new ribs are going to be, and this trailing edge, and then I'm going to bring the lot across, and I've now got our new rib there. But what I'll do, I'll worry about that rib in just a minute, because the first thing that I need to do In fact, no, I can make those ribs now. So one rib will go right on the center of this one. So the bird's mouth will go into right into the center. That's where the bird's mouth will sit. And then if I just bring this across now, so that I can line this bottom up with the bottom of the rib, and then we'll be able to set the height properly. Okay. So all I need to do now is bring that rib up, and that is our number, and we'll call that 1A, because this is going to be rib number 1, and there'll be 2 number 1 ribs in the middle here where the dihedral is. So I'll just make a copy of that, a control copy, control V, and then what I need to do is line up the bird's mouth with the red line right in the center of where the rib is going to be. Just there. And then what I'm going to do with this one is to bring it into shape, into the right size. I've just got to bring it across so it's level with the edge of that rib. Now we're going to use the corner to bring this in now, because we want it to shrink proportionally. We want it to get thinner as well as shorter. Okay, so we'll then control copy that and then produce another one here. Okay, and we'll just keep doing that now until we've got all our ribs made up, and what that will do is it will give us more ribs for the wing, so that we've got a little bit more structure there, a little bit more substance. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. So that's all our ribs done. What we need to do now is cut the notches into our trailing edge. So I've just temporarily grouped our trailing edge, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that straight onto the plan. I'll just change the colour there. I'll change that to blue. And what we'll do is we'll move that into place. Okay, that's just in place. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab our line for where the slots are going to in the trailing edge, and I'm also going to grab each of our ribs that will form part of our new plan shape. And if I just group those temporarily again, what I can do is I can bring those over and we can sit those on. All I'm doing is positioning them onto the trailing edge at the moment, so they would sit just like that. Okay, now I need to just drop this down so that trailing edge is level with our original rib slots, and we can see that that front edge now is in the right place, because this edge here will be touching the rib. Okay, so with those all lined up, what I need to do then is press Control and make sure that I've got both parts, so the trailing edge and which is grouped, and all of the new ribs which are grouped. I can bring those across, and now I'm in a position to ungroup those, ungroup that part, and now ungroup this part. And what I can do now is I can use our snipping tool, and I can just cut away all of the bits that we don't want. And what I'll be left with is new slots in our trailing edge that will allow us to put our new ribs straight into that trailing edge. Okay, so having done that, what we can do now is we can remove this guideline, because that was all that was, just a guide. Delete. So we've now got our new trailing edge, which will now accommodate all of our new ribs as well. Okay, so I think that will give us a much stronger, a much firmer and a much better rib wing to cover our for our aura cover. And bear in mind there's another 2 ribs to go in here where the dihedral is, but they're copies of rib number 1 here. Okay, so I think we can now change those and start thinking about making those into proper ribs ready to cut out. So that's all our ribs done. What we need to do now is cut the notches into our trailing edge. So I've just temporarily grouped our trailing edge, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that straight onto the plan. I'll just change the colour there. I'll change that to blue, and what we'll do is we'll move that into place. Okay, that's just in place. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab our line for where the slots are going to in the trailing edge, and I'm also going to grab each of our ribs that will form part of our new plan shape. And if I just group those temporarily again, what I can do is I can bring those over and we can sit those on. All I'm doing is positioning them onto the trailing edge at the moment, so they would sit just like that. Okay, so with those all lined up, what I need to do then is press Control and make sure that I've got both parts, so the trailing edge and which is grouped, and all of the new ribs which are grouped. I can bring those across, and now I'm in a position to ungroup those, ungroup that part, and now ungroup this part. And what I can do now is I can use our snipping tool, and I can just cut away all of the bits that we don't want, and what I'll be left with is new slots in our trailing edge that will allow us to put our new ribs straight into that trailing edge. So having done that, what we can do now is we can remove this guideline, because that was all that was, just a guide. Delete. So we've now got our new trailing edge, which will now accommodate all of our new ribs as well. Okay, so I think we can now change those and start thinking about making those into ribs ready to cut out. So the next thing to look at, I think, is we need to produce these shapes for the dihedral. Now these are going to be made out of 3mm ply, and you can see that this one at the front here is slightly deeper than that one. So this is the front of the wing and that's the back of the wing. So all I'm going to do to produce these is I will use the line tool and I'll very quickly go around the outside, and then we'll tidy that up with nodes in just a second. Now these also have a slot in them, as you can see, just here, that slot, and that slot is for another piece of ply to go in, which will hold the undercarriage. The undercarriage will then be fastened onto that. So what I'll do is I'm going to produce both of these plywood shapes here, and then I'm also going to produce a piece of ply to go across inside, and I will put small holes in that so that we can bind the wire undercarriage to the piece of ply that goes in between. I'll show you how that looks in just a minute, but let's just finish off these two shapes first. So you can see that I've just roughly put those in place. We'll go to nodes, and then all I'm going to do is with each of these, and these will all remain as corner nodes because we want nice sharp edges. So just get that right onto the corner there, and the same with this one. Okay, and then see just here, you can't quite see the node there. You can see the red dotted line, but if you just you know, make a shape around, scoop around it, you'll be able to pick up that node, and once you've got it, you can move it right into place on the outside edge of that shape. Okay, so then if we move along, be able to pick this one up and do exactly the same with that. And what I'm going to do with these in a minute, I'm going to copy them and then flip one just to make sure that they are perfectly symmetrical. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second when we do that. Okay. So that's the first one, and what we'll do, I'll put these slots in just a minute. I think that's, if we measure that, the slot is just, I think it's 5.15 millimeters from the bottom. So we'll make that around 5 millimeters, maybe, and then we'll work out what we do with that in just a short while. Okay, so that's one shape done. Let's bring that across, and I'll just put it under there. Let's just quickly do the other shape, and then we can think about finishing those off. Oops, that was miles out. So we'll just go to, I'll just correct this one first. We'll just go to nodes, and there you go. I'll just bring that node down. I missed that point by a mile. Never mind. Let's just I just want that dotted line to follow the outside edge of our black line there. Because the thing to bear in mind, of course, is that when we do use the laser, it will actually cut out that line as well, albeit a very, very fine cut. Okay, so that's our two shapes. Let's bring this one back over to where the other is. Okay, let's just check these for symmetry. So if I Control C, copy and then paste, or Control V, then what I can do is I can just flip that one and just check that they are symmetrical. And we can see that the orientation on the map isn't quite level. but that looks good to me. That's I'm happy with the symmetry there. Next, what we want to do is produce our slot for our platform to hold the wheels. So what we'll do is we'll create a rectangle. We'll make it the same length as that. Our plywood is going to be 3mm. So all we do is take that shape, make it 3mm high, just like that, and we know that that slot is now, or that will be perfect size when we drop it into our formers. And all I want to do with this is, if I grab both of those, I can center them just by pressing this button here. And the other way you can center is if you take hold of this, it will can you see it snap to the center there? That's snapped to exactly the center of this shape. So if I just copy Control V, and I put the next one there, that snaps to the center too. Okay, so all we need to do then is lower those down until they are 5mm from the bottom. And the way I'll do that is I'll just create a small block. I'll make that 5mm high. And then I drop that into the center there, and if I zoom in, I can just drag that down and snap that to the line below. And then if I bring this down using our keys so that it stays in the center, I can set that at exactly 5mm. So I now know that that's 5mm off the bottom of that shape, and it is right in the center. So I'll just move my little measure down again, zoom in, grab that bottom line and bring it down till it snaps into place. Collect this one, and using just Control, I'll drop down 1mm at a time until I get quite close, and then I can press Control and Shift and then just bring us down 1/10 of a millimeter at a time until I'm 5mm off the bottom there. Okay, so that's our two shapes made. Just remove that 5mm block. And I think the next thing to do would be to group these. Just group that one and then group this one. Next, I'll make the piece that goes in between. Okay, a couple of things to note then is, first of all, for each of these dihedral shapes here, we've got 2 per spar. If you just come across and have a look here, you can see that there's the spar going through the center, and then we've got the 3mm plywood on. You've got one at the front and one at the back, and then here on the second spar you've got one at the front and one at the back. So it's only one of these that's got the slot in it to take the landing gear platform. So I've made 2 of those for each, one with a slot and one without, and I've labelled those up. So I've got D1 and D1A, D2 and D2A. Now the other thing to note is on this plan here, if we was to measure the slot for the undercarriage platform, that is 141mm. But when we check the distance, we've set our distances based on this wing plan here, and when we measure between the 2 ribs, there'll be a rib in here and there'll be a rib in there. When we measure that distance, we find it is 134, which means that the slot would be bigger than the ribs, and there's no need for it to go through the ribs. We want the slot to stay inside of this rib and this rib, and not to just extend beyond for no good reason. So what we've done is I've reduced these in size to 129mm. which means that they will be 3.5 millimeters inside of each of these ribs. So I can make the platform a nice rectangular shape with a little tongue sticking out the end, which will fit into these slots, and it needs to be as wide as this gap here between the two ribs. So I'll just set that up on there like that, so we can get that exactly the same size. So the platform will actually contact the ribs either side. Now, as for the size of the platform, what we'll do is we'll just whip this straight across to our wing plan, and that platform is going to sit between this pair of ribs and the pair of ribs on the other wing, and it is going to be the distance, or the height of it, will be between this strengthener and this bottom strengthener. So that's how big the platform wants to be. Okay, if we bring that back to our wing, what you can see is there is now a small gap either side, and that's where our former will go. So if we bring this down until it snaps onto that line, we would want this gap to be 6 millimeters. Okay, so next what I want to do with that is, if I just produce a 129 millimeter rectangle, 129 millimeters, and that wants to be, so 129, and I'll make it 3 high. What I'll do is I'll just make sure we're perfectly square here. So if I hover above that, press A, there we go. And then if I bring this down so that these edges just line up, there we go. And then I want to Control C, Control V, make another copy of that, and then I'll bring this one up until it just touches, and then all I need to do is press center for all of those, and they're now centered. Now if I just select, without moving anything, just select this bottom rectangle and then just stretch it in, so I haven't moved this outside part, and then click on this one and just stretch it in without moving the outside part. What I can do is get my snipping tool, and I can come away and snip away the bits that we don't want, and what I've now got is a platform that will fit neatly in between these two dihedral formers, and it will just plug nicely in to that slot, and obviously nicely into this slot when the wing is formed. So that's going to be our platform for our undercarriage. Let's just label that up UC. Move that to somewhere where it's not going to get in the way of our slots for our undercarriage to be wired on. Okay, and so that is our support for the undercarriage shaped out. What I'll do is I'll put small holes in that so that we can bind the wire on, and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. So the wire for the undercarriage is going to come in on the underneath of the wing, or the underside of the wing, and then it's going to be bound in that shape around this piece of ply, which will be sat in the centre of the wing and underneath. If I start off with a rectangle, and I just make that 5 millimeters wide, I can use this as a as a frame now to arrange our small holes on. So if I now make a small circle, and I want that to be 1.5 millimeters by 1.5 millimeters, just like that. And now what I can do with this is, if I bring it down and I try to place it on that line, it will snap to the center of that line. So if I control copy and then make a number of these, what I can do is I can arrange them just by snapping them into place. And if I do maybe 4 at a time, put another 4 there. That one needs to go up just a fraction. And then just make a couple more. There we go. Then what I can do with that is I can just group those and then copy, control copy, and then come down and control V and control V, and I think that those 3 little banks of holes should be just about enough, I think, for us to bind our wheels on. Do I need another set of those? Maybe I do. Now if I copy the whole thing, control copy, I can then put another one over on this side. Just like that. And if I group all of those, I can go to center again, I can then select center again, and I now know that they are properly centered. So if I just ungroup those, what I can do is make a copy of this. I'll just group those temporarily, make a copy, and then I can maybe get 2 of those, and then if I press the full stop, they'll turn at right angles. And then what I can do is I can place those just there. And then what I can do with this one, if I ungroup, what I can do is just remove this little group here, and maybe just bring those over. And I think what we've got now is a nice and what we can do is just remove these frames that we built our shape around. We can delete those, and then what we've got is we've got our platform that we can put our undercarriage on, or we can bind our undercarriage to, and when we cut this out, all those holes will be there and we'll be able to lay the undercarriage into that and bind it to the plywood. Change those to the cutting layer and change that to our engraving layer. And now if I group again, that component is now complete. Okay, so that's how we're going to bind our undercarriage to the aircraft. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the components that we've got here ready to send across to the laser. I'll show you how I do that. There is still more work to do on the wing. We need to design in the ailerons, so I'm going to leave that for now. What I'm going to do is concentrate now on the on all of the formers for the fuselage and for the outline of the keel. So with looking at the formers first, the majority of the formers are going to be balsa. So this one at the back here, this is former I, so we can put that straight onto our cutting sheet. And now one of the things that we should do is get these nice and level. So if I just go to nodes, I can hover over this bottom edge here and press A, and that will level that up nicely. So put that into place. Just like that. Now that is I, and so if we take the next one, which is H, we can start positioning these. Now I'm laying these down like this because the grain of the balsa wood will then be running along, so it'll be running from top to bottom when we look at the fuselage, and that's the strongest way I think for us to do this. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and I'll lay all these out. I'll lay all these out on the cutting sheet, and I'll show you what they all look like in just 1 minute. Okay, so they're the formers that will be made from balsa wood, and you can see we've got the nose there as well, which will be around the motor. So the motor, only the propeller will protrude through this bit. But these formers here, I'm going to make these from 3mm ply. So I've got the motor mount, which will be made from ply, and these three formers. Now if you have a look at these, I've put a flat on the bottom of each of these, and that flat lines up. If we were to draw a horizontal line through those, they would be lined up. And the reason for those is I'm going to put a platform in there, and that platform will support the battery and the other things, such as the receiver, etc. So that's the intention there for those. I've got these formers for the nose. Now they are going to be made out of 1/8 balsa, and they will fit in here. So you can see that is 3.2mm. The width of that slot, and that those formers will fit straight into there. So if I bring those out, they can go into our 1/8 sheet as well, along with these two side formers. So I'll bring all those across. I'll convert them to our cutting layer, and then what I'll need to do with each of these is just ungroup so that I can convert the letters to our engraving layer. So I'll just quickly do that. There we go. Just highlight each of these and convert them. And then if I regroup each of those, what I can do then is I can drop them into our sheet, onto the 1/8 sheet down here, and we'll probably be able to fill in some of the spaces left by the formers. I'll show you how we do that in just 1 second. Okay, so you can see they can, there you go, that one fits right in there, which saves us a little space. Some of these other formers will fit nicely into these spaces here. Just helps us to reduce our wastage. There we go. Now bear in mind that our sheets are 100mm wide, so you can see that there's the 100mm line there. We can't cross that line with anything, otherwise it will end up cut out of two separate sheets. So I think that's our first piece of 1/8 balsa. Now this up here, the keel, is going to be made from 6.4mm balsa, so that'll be a different sheet. So what I will do with these is, if I copy all of those just like that, Control C, and then come up here and press new. I just need to save what we've got. If I come up here and press new, I'll get a new sheet. I can then put those onto that new sheet, and I will call that, we'll file, save as, and I'll put in 3.2mm balsa sheet 1, and I'll save that. Okay, so if I now open our full plan, what I can do now is I can go to this sheet here and I can remove those from the full plan. So just delete. Okay, so all those formers have now gone and they're now on a 1/8 balsa sheet. What I'll do now is I'll do the same thing with our keel, with all of these components, just making sure that I bring the lettering with them. So I'll bring each of these components down onto our sheet and I'll lay them out in the same way, and I'll show you how that looks in our next video, because what I'm going to do is stop now. I'm going to arrange everything onto the sheets and I'll show you what they look like, as I say, in the next video, and I will also in that video complete the wing, and then we'll be able to go to the laser and cut everything out. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.